What's up, everybody, and welcome into the Point After with Mitch Kaiser. I'm your host, Mitch Kaiser, coming to you on a Thursday today. Got a special bonus midweek episode for you today. Wanted to, with the Senior Bowl going on down in Mobile on Saturday, we're gonna review that game next week, and we're gonna recap and talk about some Senior Bowl risers from the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl down there in Mobile. Have a guest on next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday on that. But I wanted to get a special midweek bonus episode for you today. Just going to do a solo show today. So last week, I made a graphic after the championship game. I posted a graphic on like Twitter and TikTok, Instagram, wherever, ranking the last 10 national championship games in college football, because coming off this natty, it was just one of the best national championships we've seen, which you'll see where that falls in my rankings. But I like to look back at big games. I'm a huge nerd for college football history and historical nerd for sports in general. So one of my favorite things to do in free time is watch highlights of old big football games. And so, I'm probably the only one in the world who does that, but it's someone's got to do it. So what I did was I went ahead and ranked the last 10 national championship games in my eyes of entertainment value and storyline value, epic clash battle. Obviously, some games possess closer scores than others in the national championships, so we've had a lot of blowouts in recent years. But this one delivered a good one. 2025 last week delivered a great one, which is pretty high up on my list. So we'll get right into it. No, won't waste any time here. So the last 10 national championships, this starts going back to 2016. So the college football playoff, the 14 playoff started in 2014. So that was the cutoff, the 2015 season. So it'll be the third season of the 14 playoff, and then the last few seasons of the 12-team playoff is what is included in this list. So checking at number 10, I don't think this is any surprise here. 2022 national championship game between the Georgia Bulldogs and the TCU Horned Frogs. This game ended 65-7. Georgia won. Georgia stomped them. It was over in the first quarter. I believe they had 4 first-quarter touchdowns. I think Ladd McConkey had 2 of them. I want to say Max Duggan for TCU's quarterback ran in 1 at the end of the first quarter to cut it to like 21-7 or 28-7 or something like that. And then it was like over a 30-point game at halftime. They never looked back. I think Georgia missed a PAT that could have made the score even worse at the end and would have been 66, but it ended 65-7, the largest blowout in national championship history. No surprise there. This season was the year that Georgia beat Ohio State, the C.J. Stroud game. I don't know if you guys remember the epic C.J. Stroud game in the semifinals that year. That was really the championship game. I think everybody looking back realized that game was the championship game where Georgia came back to beat them in the fourth quarter, because Ohio State was up 14 on Georgia in the fourth, and then Stetson Bennett led like 2 legacy drives to come back and win. And then we all know what happened on the final kick, that they missed the field goal to lose. Ohio State did that at New Year's Eve. The clock struck midnight on them. But yeah, and then TCU somehow beat Michigan in a game that was a shootout with 2 pick sixes. I don't know if you're going to win any games with 2 pick sixes on that, which J.J. McCarthy threw. So it felt like TCU was playing with house money when they got to this game anyway. They, not going to say they didn't belong there, because they earned their way in. They went undefeated in the regular season and then only lost 1 game to Kansas State in the conference championship. So they earned their right to be there. It was a phenomenal season by TCU. Yeah, they were no match for Georgia. They were just no match for Stetson Bennett. This was the Brock Bowers team. Ladd McConkey had 1,000 receiving yards. And I don't know if this Georgia – so it's funny. I thought the Georgia 21 team was better than the 2022 team, but this team went undefeated. This team didn't lose a game all season, 15-0. Although they didn't have to play Bryce Young at Alabama, I still question whether they would have beat Bryce Young that season that they matched up in the SEC title game, because they got LSU and Jaden Daniels, which they smoked. But they just had that Bama curse against them in the previous year in the SEC title game. So I always had a take that if they had to play Bama again, they might have lost, but they got a pass and didn't have to face them, so they ended up going 15-0. So, not much to speak on that national championship game. 65-7, Georgia absolutely rolled them. And, that's all I got on number 10. So, moving on to number 9. 2018 national championship. This was the part 3 of Clemson. Actually, it was part 4 of the Clemson-Alabama saga. I don't know if you remember all those games, which they faced in 2 national championships. Then they played in the semifinals in 2017. And then they faced again in the championship in 2018. Tua Tagovailoa and Trevor Lawrence were the quarterbacks in those games. Clemson blew them out in this game. They destroyed them. This one was one that got laid early, and it was almost over by halftime. I think Clemson scored a late touchdown in the second quarter to take it like a 20-point lead going into half, and they never looked back from there. This was low-key the Trevor Lawrence coming out party, which he was phenomenal all season long his true freshman year, but this was when he stamped himself as the first true freshman ever to lead his team to a college football national championship win. So impressive stuff. This was when we learned about Tua and Trevor and kind of their futures and what they could do at the next level. And so, but this one was a blowout game. Not much to speak of in this game. I think the first quarter was pretty close. I think Bama had a lead in the first quarter. This was their absolutely disgusting receiving core of like Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith, and those guys. Najee Harris was on that team. But yeah, no. This was the worst game of the 4 Alabama-Clemson games, if you remember them, which we'll get to. The 2015 did not make this list because of the year cutoff, but it would have been high up. I just want you to know that game was 45-41. Alabama won the first time they met in the championship, Deshaun Watson's first year as the starter, and that game would have been high if it qualified for the final last 10, but it didn't. So this Clemson-Alabama game was the part 4 of their saga, and this was the worst game of the 4 by far. So the Trevor Lawrence coming out party, not much else to speak of on that, but that was the last time Clemson's won a natty since then. They got close in 2021 or in 2020, but haven't really been a contender since. And Dabo's kind of got to get his program back to that status, that level again. So, all right, moving on to 2020. This was another blowout, and this was Alabama beating Ohio State 52-24. So this Alabama team, I think, is the second best college football team that I've ever seen in my lifetime. We'll get to the first best team, but this is the best Alabama team I can remember. Mac Jones was the starting quarterback. You had Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Najee Harris. Just the level of receivers these guys had. There's one more I'm forgetting, but like these guys were. Oh, Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle was on that team too. Maybe the best of the bunch. So just an insane Bama team. Ohio State was no match for them. This was the Justin Fields' second season, the COVID season, where OSU wasn't even playing football at the start of the year. So just a weird year for college football and just a weird championship game. Ohio State beat Clemson in this one in the semifinal. That was an epic game. That was honestly way more entertaining than the championship, because Bama, I think Devontae Smith had 200 yards by halftime, so it was just over and not even close. So that Alabama team was one of the best offenses in college football history. So OSU didn't have much for him. Fields laid it all on the line. He left it all on the field, but just could only manage 24 points. So not much there. Moving on to 2023, number 7, 2023, Michigan Wolverines defeating the Washington Huskies 34-13. Now, this game was probably closer than the final score appeared, because Washington was in it till the very end. There was kind of one distinct drive in the fourth quarter where it really kind of ended for them and was kind of all like, I remember Penix missed Odunze on a big fourth down that could have scored and probably got them within 7. And they were down 14 for most of the game, but they were still in it, if that makes sense. And there were multiple drives in the second half where Michigan could have put them away and ended it, and they never did. And J.J. McCarthy was not his best this game and gave Washington a window to come back and win, but it was the game. I don't know if you guys remember, Donovan Edwards like broke out for like 200-yard, like two like 70-yard touchdown runs, like his first two carries, and like they were just jumped out to a big lead, and Washington was playing from behind and just could never get to within a touchdown. They got it to within 2 scores and kind of kept it there all game, but just a few fourth down misses at the end from Penix, and Michigan's pass rush was just dominant all game. The Washington O-line had no answers for them, and that was the best Michigan team of my lifetime, the 15-0 team, and one of the best college football teams I can remember the last decade. So that was an impressive run by Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. So, yeah, that's all I got on number 7. Moving on to number 6, the following year, following up to Michigan, I don't know if Michigan fans will love this. Ohio State's getting the edge on this one. That was the better game of the two. 2024, Ohio State beating Notre Dame 34-23. Notre Dame put up a fight. I think Notre Dame made this closer than a lot of people thought they would. Starting with the opening drive of Riley Leonard, like 15 plays, 8-minute touchdown drive where he was throwing up on the sidelines after, just gave it everything he had on that drive alone, and they were just out of it after that. So that Ohio State team just had too much talent on both sides of the ball to compete with. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuamaloda, and then Will Howard went on an unprecedented quarterback run, like just lethal. I was at that national championship actually down in Atlanta. That was on my birthday last year. I was at that game, and I was amazed by some of the throws he made. The final dagger throw to Jeremiah Smith on the outside, just what a elite ball he threw right there. And he was elite all playoffs. And Will Howard became my QB3 after a dominant playoff run. And I still have some hope for him at the next level. I still think he could be the Pittsburgh Steelers' next franchise quarterback potentially. So we'll see if he can develop there. But that was when I gained a lot of respect for Will Howard and the run he went on. And that Ohio State team was just insanely talented. I don't know if there was any team beating them after that. After the Oregon game and the Tennessee game where they opened it up, they just went on a crazy, unprecedented run. So, all right. Moving on to number 5 in my championship game rankings. 2019, which now we talked about that 2020 Bama team was the second best college football team I can remember. This 2019 LSU Tiger team was the greatest college football team ever assembled, in my opinion. Joe Burrow at quarterback, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Those are arguably 3 of the best players in the NFL right now. The 2 best receivers, maybe to Puka Nacua. I'll give Puka some flowers on that. But Jefferson and Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Derek Stingley was the corner, Patrick Queen, Grant Delpit. I mean, this team was unbelievable. They murdered everyone in the field, it felt like every game. Like the semifinal game against Oklahoma was like 65-20, and Burrow threw for like 7 touchdowns in the first half. Just ridiculous stuff. There was no match for them in the country in all of college football. Like I remember their closest game all season was like a road game at Auburn, and it was like a 3-point win. But other than that, they just massacred everybody and walked into Tuscaloosa, won by 5, one of the best college football games I can remember in my lifetime. The NFL talent that was on that field, the Joe Burrow versus Tua game, exceptional stuff. And this Clemson team was good too. This Clemson team had Trevor Lawrence and T. Higgins, and that was one of the best. This Clemson team was better than the previous team, I thought, in 2018 that won. So that's saying something right there for how good this LSU team was, because Clemson didn't lose a game all season and got crushed by LSU in the championship game by 17. So it was a close game for a first half, and then LSU just opened up in the second half and rolled them. So that was the best college football team I can remember. That was one of the greatest quarterback runs I can remember from Joe Burrow. And Fernando Mendoza is getting the same run, the honeymoon experience, the Heisman Trophy, national championship, #1 pick. So Joe Burrow's the last to do that. Cam Newton is the only other quarterback to do that, and then Fernando Mendoza will become the third in April. So, all right, that's all I got on number 5. So moving on to number 4, we're getting into the nitty gritty games here. 2021 Georgia, Alabama. So this was a rematch from the regular season and a rematch from a previous championship game that's a little higher on this list. So this game, the final score was 15 points, but this was a 1-point game the entire game. Like, this was tied up. Bama was driving with a chance to tie it up, potentially take the lead on the final drive, and Bryce Young threw a pick six, threw a game-sealing interception to Kelee Ringo, who was streaking down the sidelines. I'll never forget the Georgia crowd just going mad, just losing their minds. Those for their first championship in 40 years, just epic stuff. This was a fun game, but man, this was a chess match early. I think it was 9-9 at halftime, I want to say, or maybe lower than that, but chess match early, only like 3 first quarter points or something before Stetson Bennett really get comfortable later in the second half. After a costly turnover, he had his best drive and then kind of saved the game for Georgia later in the game with a touchdown drive, and then but he almost cost them with a crazy fumble that turned it over in Bama territory, I remember. So I'll never forget that final drive where Bryce was leading him. I thought he was going to win it for Alabama, and then Kelee Ringo game-sealing, national championship sealing interception for Kirby Smart's first title before he went and did it again the following year. So this was the best college defense I've ever seen, though. I want to make that clear. The 2021 Georgia defense was basically just the Philadelphia Eagles, who went on to win a Super Bowl a few years later. So this Georgia defense had, like we just mentioned, Kelee Ringo, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith, Nakobe Dean. I know I'm missing a few other Philadelphia Eagles stars, but that's just to name a few right there of how good this Bulldog defense was. I think they averaged like less than 10 points giving up all season. So yeah, that was the best college defense of my lifetime that I can remember. So, and like I said earlier, I thought this Georgia team, 2021, was better than the 2022 Georgia team that repeated as back-to-back champs. So, all right, that's all I got on number 4. Top 3, getting into my top 3 national championship games of the last 10 years. So, number 3 might be controversial to the general public. I think I did have a little bit of recency bias when I made these. So, when I made the graphic a week ago, I had these two. In my head, I may have flipped it, but I'm going to leave it as is for this because I just didn't make another graphic for it. So, we're going to leave it as is because I thought the storylines were better for this year, but we'll get into that. Number 3, I have the 2017 first Alabama-Georgia game that went to overtime. So this was the Jake Fromm, Jalen Hurts game that turned into the Tua Tagovailoa game. So I don't know if you guys remember. Jalen Hurts was the starter for Alabama this season, was playing a miserable first half. Not a good first half for my guy Jalen. And then Jake Fromm was playing all right, solid game for him and the Georgia Bulldogs. And then they brought in Tua in the second half, who led the comeback and ultimately threw the game-winning touchdown pass in overtime to Devontae Smith. I think that's a play college football fans will remember for eternity, where the play prior, Tua takes a huge sack that gets him to like 2nd and 20, and then just throws a layered ball over the top, championship winner. And then they never looked back. And then Tua never looked back as the backup. You know, he became the starter. He went on to be the starter after Jalen lost his starting job. Although in the following year, the SEC championship game rematch between Georgia and Bama, Jalen did the same thing to Tua. Tua was struggling at halftime, and then they brought in Hurts to save the game, and he led the game winner. So I thought that was an all-time story for college football. I thought that was pretty epic, and that was kind of when I learned about Jalen Hurts' greatness and the leader he is and kind of what he would go on to become in Philadelphia. But this was kind of the game that started it all, the 2017 Alabama-Georgia game that went to overtime. So I put this right above the 2021 game. But yeah, when Alabama won in overtime, you can't ask for much more than an OT championship game with a walk-off victory, so can't ask for much more than a walk-off. So, however, it did not top this year's national championship game for me. Coming in at number 2 is 2025, technically 2026, this season's Indiana Miami national championship. Hoosiers winning 27-21. I thought this, now reasons being for having this year's over the 2017 Bama game, I thought the storylines were better around this game. I think college football has come a long way since 2017, so I enjoy some of the games now more than I did then, but maybe that's just me becoming a bigger fan now that I was 8 years ago, but I've been a fan since I've been alive, so I could probably rank the championships back to like when I was like 10, so but either way, I thought the storylines and the narratives around this game with like Cristobal playing with Mendoza's dad in high school and like Mendoza being from Miami and like not getting recruited there, the game being in Miami for the Hurricanes who literally play there, Carson Beck being the villain of college football and then getting a chance at the legacy drive and then throwing the interception. I just thought it was an awesome storyline, and I thought everything about this year's game was epic, man. And I really enjoyed it. I thought the first half was actually equivalent to the first half of the 2017 Alabama-Georgia game, so that kind of canceled out for me. And I know this game didn't go into overtime, and we didn't get the game-winning drive from Beck, but I thought Mendoza winning it for like the golden boy of college football was a better story for the country and just for college football in general, for Mendoza's draft stock and for him going off into the NFL, being the Raiders QB. You had Tom Brady on the sidelines, the owner of the Raiders, literally watching him, judging every single throw he makes. You know it. So that's why I like this game better, because I thought the Superman play from Mendoza diving into the end zone for the game winner, like I just thought it was all epic. So I enjoyed the storylines around this year's game more, but if you have 2017 higher than this year, I'm not going to fight you on that. I'm no argument from me. I think a lot. I've seen the 2017 game number 1 on a lot of these lists, so I think that's completely fair. I think ESPN ranked the last few championship games, and they had the 2017 Bama Georgia game as number 1. So completely fair. I'm not going to argue it. I think that was an epic game, but I personally enjoyed this year's championship more. All right, number 1 now. By process of elimination for the last 10 years, I think you can narrow it down to what I thought was the best championship game of the last decade, which was actually the 10th game 10 years ago, 2016. The part 2 of Clemson-Bama, where Clemson beat Alabama after losing to them the first year, 35-31, Tigers defeat Alabama Crimson Tide. Deshaun Watson, walk-off, game-winning touchdown throw with 1 second left to Hunter Renfrow. I'll never forget that play. I was in my freshman dormitory in college at University of Cincinnati just going nuts after it, because that was the all-time legacy drive now from Deshaun Watson, which we're going to keep this on the field now because looking back at Deshaun's career is a little more depressing now than it was then, but we're not going to get into that. So we'll keep it to college Deshaun, Clemson Deshaun, because he was one of my favorite college quarterbacks ever. And I loved watching the guy, and he had an all-time college career for the Clemson Tigers. So what made this game so special to me was the fact that they lost to them the year prior. So I'm a nerd for cool sports stories and like comeback stories. I'm a sucker for it. I fully admit it. And I love a good redemption story. So the fact that Clemson lost to Alabama in the 2015 national championship game by 4, by 5, excuse me, that was by 5. 45-40 was that final score. Got to correct myself on that. And then you come back, and then all season that loss stays with you, and that motivates you, and that is the chip on your shoulder for going into next season. I guarantee that whole Clemson team had bulletin board material with Alabama on the name of it, because they brought back like the whole team, and those guys were so motivated to beat that Alabama team because they hadn't lost a game since like week 3 of 2015 where they lost to, I believe it was Chad Kelly at Ole Miss. I want to say was the quarterback for Ole Miss then and Alabama. But Alabama hadn't lost for like 2 seasons. They were undefeated, and Deshaun Watson just gives the legacy performance. Some of the names of the quarterbacks who have defeated Alabama, the Nick Saban Alabama teams, it's a list of like all-time Hall of Fame quarterbacks. So, and then you got Jarrett Stidham too. Stiddy, can't forget him. He's a beat Nick Saban guy. So that game was epic. It was one of those chess matches early where Bama got out to an early lead, and it looked like Clemson was not going to be able to keep up or even move the ball in this defense. That was one of the best Alabama defenses I can remember. I know they had Jonathan Allen on that team, man in the middle. Minkah Fitzpatrick, I want to say Minkah was on that team, and obviously Deshaun had some NFL studs as well. Wayne Gallman, Mike Williams, guys like that. So, but he carried that team, man. He carried that team in that game and led an all-time drive with 2 minutes to play after Jalen Hurts ran in what I thought was going to be the game winner. That was Jalen Hurts' first year, true freshman year as a starter. I don't know if people remember leading Alabama that year where you came in not knowing who the heck Jalen Hurts was. But yeah, I'll never forget when Alabama took the lead with 2 minutes to go. I was watching that game like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen again to Clemson. They're going to lose again in the same fashion they lost the year prior. And then they got in the huddle, 2 minutes to go, an all-time drive to never look back in college football history. Deshaun throws the final pass. Hunter Renfrow catches it. Game winner. And yeah, that was it. That was kind of Clemson stamping themselves as they've arrived in the elite of the elite programs in college football. And that was the best championship game of the last decade to me, man. That's an all-time game on my list. Like, if I had to rank all-time college football games, that might be number 1 too. That I'll never forget that game because I just felt like anytime you get a championship game that's a rematch from the season prior and the team who loses ends up winning, I just think that's an epic storyline for sports. And that's what we live for, man. That's why we watch sports. That's why we do it. And that's why you want to chase greatness, really, and prove the doubters wrong after losing the year prior. So that's why I put 2016 at Clemson beating Alabama 35-31. That is my all-time number 1 championship game of the last decade. I will show the list up on the screen here so you guys can see it. And that's all I got for you today on the Point After with Mitch Kaiser. Just wanted to do a special bonus midweek episode here. Again, like I said, got the Senior Bowl coming up this Saturday down in Mobile, Alabama. Going to review that next week with a guest, and we're going to talk about some risers coming out of the Senior Bowl. So yeah, that's all I got for you today. I'm Mitch Kaiser, your host of the Point After with Mitch Kaiser. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe below, and have a great rest of your day.